The laughter hits before Darrow Vance even crosses the threshold. Not the loud kind, worse, the quiet kind, the kind that passes between men who've already decided the outcome of something. It moves through the glass-walled lobby like a current, low and deliberate, bouncing off Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook 42 stories of downtown air. And it is aimed, every last ripple of it, directly at the man walking through the door in a faded grey hoodie and scuffed work boots that have seen 3 winters too many. Darrow doesn't slow down, doesn't speed up. He moves the way still water moves, with a quiet that has weight to it. His eyes do one pass of the room. One. The kind of sweep that clocks exits, angles, distances, and every hand in the space without landing on any single thing long enough to make it obvious. The lobby is stacked. 15 candidates, maybe 16. Every one of them built like they crawled out of a combat training manual. Compression shirts, tactical boots so clean they catch light. Jawlines tightened with the kind of intention that says, I am supposed to be here. 2 of them are holding resumes in thick folders. Another is quietly rolling his neck, popping joints like a man warming up for something already decided. Darrow holds nothing. He finds a spot near the back wall, stands with his hands loose at his sides, and waits. That's when the man to his left leans toward a friend and says it. Not quietly enough. Security tryouts are down the hall, handyman. Chuckles. A few of them. Enough. Darrow doesn't turn. Doesn't blink. And his jaw doesn't tighten, his shoulders don't shift, and he doesn't give the room a single thing to feed on. But his eyes move, not to the man who spoke, but to a figure seated in the glass-walled waiting area behind the lobby partition. A little girl, 7 years old, all knees and braids and a worn yellow sketch pad pressed to her chest. Amara. She isn't drawing right now, she is watching him. And the look on her face isn't the simple trust of a child who doesn't understand what's happening. It is the trust of a child who understands everything and is holding her breath. If you've ever had one person in this world whose opinion of you matters more than your own heartbeat, you already understand why Darrow Vance walked through that door. And if you haven't, stay close. You're about to. The recruiter calls names from a tablet. That candidates pair off. The room begins to sort itself by hierarchy. The loud, confident ones near the front, the calculated ones hanging back, all of them performing for the 2 judges seated behind a long steel table at the far end. Darrow watches the judges more than he watches the candidates. Then a name cuts the room differently. Blais Torrin. Even the ceiling seems to lower. 6'5", shoulders that block light, moving with the slow ease of a man who has never once felt physically threatened by anything breathing. Blais scans the room the way a predator scans an enclosure. Not because he's worried, but because habit is habit. His reputation isn't posted anywhere. It doesn't need to be. It sits on him like weather. He finds Darrow against the back wall. His eyes stay there a full 3 seconds longer than they need to. And just before the recruiter calls out the first matchup, just before the room locks into the order of things, someone near the judge's table leans toward the person beside them and whispers, "Why would a man like him even be allowed in here?" Darrow hears it. He doesn't answer. He looks at Amara once more through the glass, and something moves behind his eyes. Not fear, not anger. Something older. Something that has been waiting, very quietly, for exactly this moment. The fluorescent light above the stove flickers twice before it holds. That's the detail Darrow remembers. Not the date, not the exact words, just that flicker above the stove at 2:17 in the morning while he stood in the kitchen of a two-bedroom apartment on Harwick Street and tried to hold himself together without making a sound that would wake Amara. 3 years ago, or different life. Nyla had been in the hospital for 11 days at that point. 14 days total before she came home. Quieter, slower, with a look in her eyes that she tried to hide and couldn't. The doctors used careful words. Episode, stable, monitor. Words that were designed to give information without delivering weight. But weight has a way of finding you regardless. The night she came home, she sat at the kitchen table in the yellow chair she'd bought at a garage sale and repainted herself, and she held Darrow's hand across the surface and said, "I need you to promise me something." He said he would before she finished the sentence. "Promise me," she said, "that you won't let this world make her feel small." That was it. No dramatic speech, no list of instructions for a future she wasn't planning to abandon, just that one thing. And when Nyla Vance left this life 14 months later, on a Thursday in October, with rain on the window and Amara asleep in the next room, she took everything except that promise. Darrow kept it like a second skeleton. The months that followed were a kind of math no one prepares you for. Grief on one side of the equation. Rent, food, childcare, school supplies on the other. His income from private security consulting had been steady, until it wasn't, because the world that hired men like him had a long memory for men who walked away from it, and Darrow had walked. He'd taken on shift work at a logistics warehouse 3 nights a week, driving jobs on weekends. Amara's teacher had called twice about her falling asleep in class. He'd sat in his car afterward both times and stared at the dashboard without starting the engine. What he wasn't failing, he was losing ground. There's a difference, and the difference matters at 2 a.m. when the stove light flickers and your daughter is asleep, and you are doing the quiet arithmetic of a man deciding how much further he can bend before something breaks. The bodyguard position paid 4 times his current income, benefits, housing allowance. It was not a lucky break. It was a calculated move. But the night he found the listing, the night he printed the application and folded it into his jacket pocket, something else happened. He opened his front door to bring in the trash cans from the curb and found a black envelope sitting on his welcome mat. No postage, no return address, no name on the front. Inside, a single photograph. A street corner. His street corner. And written on the back in blue ink, 4 words, "You should have stayed." He kept the photograph. Most people would have thrown it away, told themselves it was nothing, let the anxiety settle. Darrow pressed it flat between 2 pieces of cardboard, slid it inside the false bottom of his toolkit, and went to sleep. Because a man who has trained in threat assessment doesn't panic at a threat. He files it. He watches. He waits to understand the shape of what's coming. The life Darrow walked away from wasn't complicated to describe, but it was almost impossible to explain to someone who had never lived inside it. For 7 years, he worked as a preparation specialist for high-value individuals operating in environments where failure was not survivable. He didn't carry a weapon most days. He didn't need to. His work was architecture, reading spaces, reading people, was identifying the moment a situation shifts from manageable to lethal before anyone else in the room felt the temperature change. His clients weren't celebrities. They weren't executives in trouble with ex-business partners. They operated in the margins of legal geography, where government entities and private interests overlapped, and the line between security and shadow work was a matter of paperwork and selective memory. He was very good. He was also, after 7 years, done.
He left on a Tuesday, filed no paperwork because there was no paperwork, signed nothing because there was nothing to sign. He simply stopped showing up, moved Nyla and a 6-month-old Amara to Harwick Street, and began the quiet project of becoming a man who could not be traced to the work he used to do. For 2 years it held. Then the car accident happened. I'd accept it wasn't an accident. Darrow knew the moment the black Chevy Suburban ran the light at Kepler and 9th and T-boned his passenger side that it had been timed. He had been watching that intersection for 40 seconds before he reached it, and that Suburban had been parked until he entered the crosswalk zone. He walked away from the wreck. The Suburban burned. Nobody followed up. No police report found him. No one called. And that silence, that total and deliberate silence, was louder than any threat. From that day forward, Darrow checked exits when he entered rooms. He sat with his back to walls. He counted hands at bus stops and grocery checkout lines and school parking lots. He noticed what clothing people repeated and which routes strangers used twice, not because he was falling apart, but because somewhere in the architecture of his former life, someone had marked him. And marked men don't get warnings, they get windows. What he didn't know, what kept him lying awake in the dark with his eyes on the ceiling, was whether the tryout he'd just walked into was an opportunity, or a door that was already open from the other side. The first candidate throws a punch so fast it cracks the air. His name is Kelso Briggs, and he moves like someone who has spent years weaponizing his body into something that makes other people recalculate. The judges at the long steel table don't flinch. They write. Their pens move at the same speed regardless of what happens on the mat. Cool, mechanical, deliberate. That alone tells Darrow more about this room than anything printed on the application form. This is not a performance review. This is a selection process. There's a difference, and the difference is, in a performance review, the strongest person wins. In a selection process, they're looking for something more specific. Darrow watches from the far side of the room, his back to the wall, arms at his sides. Kelso finishes his combination. Clean, powerful, technically strong. One of the judges puts a mark on his sheet without looking up. The candidate next to him, Dante Millbrook, broader through the chest, quieter in his movements, goes next. His assessment is more controlled, less explosive. He reads the space first, moves second. The judge who wasn't watching Kelso watches Dante. The room operates like a machine that has been running long before any of these candidates arrived. A man near the center, wide as a doorframe, catches Darrow's eye across the room and holds it. Not a challenge, an evaluation. He does it for 2 seconds, then looks away, which tells Darrow he's been assessed, categorized, and filed under not a factor. That's fine. That's exactly where Darrow wants to be. Then Blaise Torrin steps onto the mat for his warm assessment round, and the room changes registers entirely. He doesn't show off. That's the thing that's worse than showing off. He moves through the evaluation like a man who finds the whole exercise mildly beneath him, but is willing to engage as a courtesy to the judges. His speed is real. His control is surgical. When his sparring partner absorbs a body check and stumbles 3 feet sideways, Blaise doesn't track him. He's already reset, already still, already looking at the next thing. A candidate near the wall exhales quietly. No way. One of the judges leans back in his chair. The other one, older, grey at the temples, who hasn't put his pen down once, looks up for the first time since the session started. He looks directly at Darrow, not at Blaise, at Darrow. His expression reveals nothing. His eyes stay for a beat, then drop back to the page. The recruiter approaches the center of the room with a tablet, scrolling through pairings. Next matchup, he announces. He reads the first name, then the second. The room doesn't gasp. It goes tight, which is worse, because a gasp means surprise. Tight means everyone already knows what this means, and nobody is expecting it to go well. One of the judges sets his pen down, slowly. The other one says, quietly enough that only the people closest to him hear it clearly. This could end badly. Blaze rolls his neck once, left, right, and the sound of it carries. He takes 3 steps onto the mat and plants his feet in the way men plant feet when they are not worried about what is in front of them. His eyes find Darrow across the open floor, and his expression does something specific. It relaxes. Not into warmth. Into the kind of ease that predators get when they understand the distance between themselves and the thing they are closing on. "You should step out," he says. His voice is low, almost reasonable. "Tell them you changed your mind. Nobody's going to think less of you for being smart about it." Darrow steps onto the mat. He doesn't respond. "I'm serious," Blaze continues. The crowd, the other candidates, of the 2 staff members standing near the east wall, the judge who picked his pen back up, all of them register the exchange. "You got your kid out there watching this?" Something tightens in Darrow's chest, like a wire being pulled from both ends. His breathing stays even, his expression doesn't shift. But inside, behind that stillness, a memory arrives without asking permission. Rain on a hospital window, the particular cold of a plastic chair at 3 a.m. Nyla's voice, thinner than it used to be, but still carrying the precision of a woman who chooses her words like she means them. Don't become someone she can't recognize. He'd held her hand and said nothing, because he didn't know what she was warning him against. He does now. "I'm not here to perform," Darrow says. His voice is even, almost quiet. "I'm here to secure a future." Blaze tilts his head. Not dismissal, but the look of a man who has just heard something confusing. He processes it. Then his expression settles back into certainty. "You came to get hurt," he says. The recruiter raises one hand. The crowd repositions. 3 candidates shift their weight. The older judge puts his pen flat on the table. The air in the room changes pressure the way air changes before a storm. Not dramatically, not obviously, but in a way that your body registers before your mind catches up. Blaze doesn't take a stance. He stands the way men stand when the outcome is already written. He bounces once on his toes. "I'm ending this," he says, in one move. He's not bragging. He actually believes it. Darrow exhales slowly. His hands stay loose. His feet are shoulder-width apart. And his eyes move. Not to Blaze's face, not to his hands. Somewhere between his shoulder and his hip. The place where intention lives before the body commits. The signal comes. And as the first motion rolls through Blaze Torrent's frame, Darrow does something that no one in this room expects. His lips move. One sentence, almost nothing, barely air. The man next to the east wall leans forward to catch it and misses it entirely. Whatever Darrow just said, whatever that was, it wasn't a prayer. Blaze Torrent's first punch removes air from the room. Not because it lands, because of what it sounds like when it doesn't. A thick displacement, a rush of nothing where impact should have been. And then the visual confusion of watching a man Blaze's size commit everything into a strike and connect with empty space where a body was standing a half-second ago. Darrow isn't there. He moved left, barely, 2 inches, maybe 3. Enough. His feet didn't scramble, his arms didn't fly up in panic. He simply was in one position and then he was in another, and the economy of that transition, the total absence of wasted motion, is what makes Two of the candidates near the east wall go quiet in the middle of a side conversation. Blaze resets, jaw set, eyes recalibrating. He attacks again, faster this time, a combination left body shot, driving into right hook, the kind of sequence designed to eliminate defensive options by volume. There is no clean escape from a combination like that if you're thinking about it. Darrow isn't thinking. He's already moving on the first beat of the sequence, a lateral step, a weight shift backward. His right shoulder rotates inward just enough to let the hook track past his ear, close enough to feel the displaced air against his skin, and he comes out the other side of the combination untouched, standing 3 feet from where he started, breathing through his nose. "Stop moving," someone near the side wall says under their breath. Not to Darrow, just to the moment, the way people speak to a screen when something isn't going the way they expected. The room is no longer ambient noise and low conversation. It has gone fully, completely still. One of the staff members near the door has stopped writing. Blaze circles. His breathing is still controlled, but there is something working behind his eyes now that wasn't there 60 seconds ago. It's not anger yet. Something before anger. The early friction of a man who has never had to solve this particular problem and is running calculations he doesn't have prior data for. He feints left, drives right, commits his full body weight into a forward press designed to overwhelm positioning rather than land one clean shot. It's the move of a man who understands that if he can get his mass into contact with Darrow's frame, the size equation ends the conversation. Darrow steps back. Once. Twice. The crowd reads it as retreat. And that is exactly what Darrow needs them to think. Because he isn't retreating, he is counting. Breath intervals, weight transfer patterns. The way Blaze's left knee tracks inward when he plants for a power shot. The 2-second reset he takes after a missed combination before his shoulders reload. And he has now missed 4 times, 4 data points, 4 confirmations of a pattern that Darrow has been mapping since the first swing. The older judge at the steel table sets both hands flat on the surface and leans forward. He says nothing, but his posture says everything. The second judge leans toward him and murmurs, barely moving his lips. He's not avoiding. The first judge doesn't look away from the mat. "No," he says. He's not. Blaze loads up. Full commitment. The kind of swing that finishes things. And Darrow finally stops moving backward. The shift is so fast that the people closest to the mat don't process it in real time, and they process it afterward, in the half-second of total silence that follows, when their eyes and their minds finally sync up and deliver the information their bodies registered first. Something just happened, and it is over. And the man who was supposed to be on the ground is standing, and the man who was supposed to be standing is not. Here is what happened. Blaze committed. Full weight, full extension, full intent. The kind of move that has ended every confrontation he has ever chosen to end. His right arm came forward with everything behind it. And in that moment of total commitment, when all of Blaze Toran's 260 pounds of engineered force was moving in one direction, Darrow stepped forward, not sideways, not backward, forward, into the strike. His left hand intercepted Blaze's wrist at the precise point in the arc where the momentum was extended but not yet retracted. The dead zone of a punch where the power has been spent but the body hasn't recovered it yet. His right hand found the back of Blaze's elbows simultaneously. His hips rotated counterclockwise. His center of gravity dropped 4 inches in under a second. He didn't throw Blaze, he redirected him, used every pound of that committed momentum like a rudder uses current, not fighting it, not stopping it, just turning it 90 degrees from where it intended to go. Blaze Toran left the ground, not dramatically, not with a shout or a spin. He simply ceased to be vertical and became horizontal, and the mat accepted the full weight of him with a sound that is hard to describe to someone who hasn't heard it. Not a thud exactly, more like a period, a full stop, the sonic equivalent of a sentence that has ended. Nobody applauds, nobody speaks. One candidate's water bottle hits the floor and nobody looks at it. Darrow stands where he finished the movement. Hands at his sides, breathing through his nose. He doesn't look at the crowd. He looks at Blay, not with satisfaction, not with contempt, with the same quality of attention he has held since the beginning. Clinical, present, complete. Blay attempts to rise. His left arm pushes against the mat, makes it 3 inches, stops, because Darrow's left foot is positioned against his shoulder in a way that isn't painful. It is simply precise, a lock that doesn't require force, a geometry of position that makes rising not a question of strength, but a question of physics, and the physics are not in Blay's favor. Release. The recruiter's voice is flat and immediate. Darrow lifts his foot and steps back in one clean motion. Blay sits up, takes 4 seconds, runs his hand over his face. He doesn't look at Darrow. He doesn't look at the crowd. He looks at the floor with the expression of a man processing something that doesn't fit inside the framework he has built his entire identity around. The room stays silent for 3 full seconds after that. Then the older judge at the steel table does something no one has seen him do since the session began. He stands up. He doesn't say anything, he just stands, and that gesture, in this room, from this man, lands on every person present like a declaration. And the second judge watches him, then looks at Darrow, and his expression carries the first visible emotion he has shown all afternoon. It is not admiration. It is recognition. Like he has just seen something he was not sure he would see today. Something he was, perhaps, specifically looking for. The recruiter crosses the mat before the silence fully breaks. He stops 6 feet from Darrow, tablet in one hand, pen in the other. But he isn't writing. He is looking. Directly. With the kind of focus that has nothing to do with a form that needs to be filled out. "Where did you learn that?" he asks. The room pulls tight around the question. Darrow's answer doesn't come immediately. He takes one breath. Measured, and like a man who has learned the hard way that what you say in rooms like this, and how fast you say it, tells people things you didn't intend to share. "I trained people," he says. The recruiter waits. "That's vague," he says. "Yes," Darrow says, and doesn't add anything. One of the candidates near the far wall shifts his weight. Blay Torrin is on his feet now, standing off to the side with his arms crossed, and an expression that has moved past humiliation into something more complicated. The look of a man who has just realized the story he tells about himself may need revision. "What kind of people?" the recruiter asks. Darrow looks at him evenly. People who weren't allowed to lose. The older judge, the one who stood, takes 3 steps toward the mat. He stops beside the recruiter and says nothing. But his presence in that position, standing instead of sitting, moving instead of staying, is a form of punctuation. Darrow notes it, files it. "You said trained," the recruiter continues. "Past tense. Why did you stop?" Darrow's eyes move once, briefly, almost imperceptibly, toward the glass partition at the back of the room. Amara is still there, still watching. She has stopped clutching the sketch pad. Now she is holding it flat on her knees and she is not drawing. She is watching her father the way a child watches something they are trying to memorize. "Because the job didn't end when you went home," Darrow says. His voice stays level. "And eventually, it followed me there." The air in the room shifts, not dramatically. But the two candidates closest to the recruiter take a half step back, unconsciously, the way bodies move when they sense that the weight of a conversation has just changed. You're saying the work put your family at risk, the recruiter says slowly. Darrow reaches into the front pocket of his hoodie. He pulls out a folded photograph and holds it by the edge. He doesn't hand it over, he simply turns it to face the recruiter. The image is a black SUV, passenger side caved in, glass across the asphalt, frame bent at the angle that bodies bend things when they hit them at speed. The recruiter stares at it. His face changes. "That's the incident on Kepler and 9th, he says. His voice is lower now. "Last month, the report said no serious injuries, no identified cause." "No identified cause," Darrow repeats. Not agreeing, not correcting, just noting the distance between the two.
You were in that vehicle. I was driving it." A pause long enough to breathe in twice. "I wasn't supposed to walk away from that." The recruiter looks at the photograph, looks at Darrow, looks at the photograph again, and then, quietly, like a man setting something heavy down after carrying it too long, he exhales. "But I walked away," Darrow says, "and now they know I exist. And now I'm standing in a room connected to the exact kind of work they didn't want me going back to." The older judge speaks for the first time since the session began. His voice is low, even, textured with something that might be history. "Then you understand," the judge says, "what you're stepping back into?" Darrow meets his eyes. "Yes," he says.
That's why I'm here." The recruiter takes 2 steps back and looks at Darrow the way a man looks at a structure he is trying to determine will hold weight. "Walk me through the incident," he says. "All of it." The room has stopped pretending to be a room of candidates. Every person still in it is listening. The judges aren't writing. The staff near the east wall have gone completely still. This is no longer an evaluation. This is something else. Everyone feels it. Nobody says so. Darrow speaks without inflection the way men speak when the facts themselves carry enough force to not require performance. He had been moving a client, routine, private transport, no advance team, off-schedule route. The kind of precaution that should have made the trip invisible. He'd taken Kepler because he always varied his approach, and he'd clocked the Suburban parked at the northwest corner of 9th 11 seconds before he entered the intersection. He registered it, filed it, kept moving, because a parked vehicle is not a threat, it is data. Then it moved, not to accelerate through traffic. It moved with timing, precise, coordinated, the kind of execution that requires either a signal or a countdown, and Darrow had seen neither because they were not meant to be seen. The impact hit the passenger side at approximately 40 miles per hour. The door caved, the frame held, barely. The client was out of the vehicle and into a building lobby in under 20 seconds because Darrow had already identified the lobby as the secondary exit point before they were hit. Nobody chased. That was the detail that stayed with him. Nobody chased. No secondary vehicle. No follow-up contact, no communication, nothing. Because it wasn't a hit, it was a message. "We know where you are, we know what route you take, we know you're back." "You told no one," the recruiter says. Statement, not question. "No one to tell," Darrow says. Filing a report meant explaining who the client was. Explaining the client meant explaining what I used to do. That conversation opens doors I closed for a reason. "So you absorbed it?" "I assessed it. Then I changed routes, changed schedules, pulled Amara from her after-school program for 3 weeks. Then I found this posting." The recruiter looks at the photograph one more time before Darrow takes it back. You understand, the recruiter says carefully, that applying for this position, being here, today, or in this room, potentially confirms to whoever is watching that you're re-engaging with high-profile protective work. Yes. That escalates your exposure. Yes. Then why? Because a moving target, Darrow says, is harder to plan for than a stationary one. He pauses. I've been stationary for 3 years. Changing addresses doesn't fix that. Taking a warehouse shift doesn't fix that. The only thing that changes the equation is changing my position entirely. The recruiter is quiet. The older judge is still standing. He has not sat back down since he rose during the fight. That detail is not lost on Darrow. They're going to come regardless, Darrow continues. That's already decided. The question is whether I'm in a position to see it coming. He looks toward the glass partition. Amara has moved. She is standing now, a sketchpad pressed to her chest, watching. They won't come for me directly, Darrow says. His voice stays even, almost too even. They know I'm not the leverage. The room waits. They'll come for her. 3 seconds of complete silence. Then a sound, fabric shifting, a quiet exhale, 1 foot adjusting on polished marble. And the older judge turns away from the mat, walks back to the steel table, and picks up his pen. He writes something, 1 line, folds the paper once, passes it to the recruiter without looking at him. The recruiter reads it. His expression doesn't change. He looks at Darrow. You're not just qualified, he says. You're exactly what this situation requires. The recruiter says the word, and the room exhales. Hired. It lands clean and final, the way a bolt sounds when it locks into place. Not loud, not decorated, just certain. And Darrow receives it the same way. No visible relief, no collapse of composure, just a single, controlled breath through the nose and a slight drop in the tension that has been holding his shoulders a 1/4 inch higher than his natural position for the past 2 hours. He walks back through the lobby, past the candidates who are now quiet in the way people go quiet when the story they told themselves about a situation has been corrected without anyone raising their voice. Past the judges' table where only 1 judge remains seated. The older one has moved to a position near the window, his back to the room, phone to his ear. Darrow notes it, files it, keeps walking. Amara sees him through the glass before he reaches the door of the waiting area. She is on her feet before he opens it, sketchpad tucked under her arm. Out and she crosses the floor in 3 quick steps and locks both arms around his waist with the full, committed force of a 7-year-old who has been holding herself together for 2 hours and is finally allowed to stop. He wraps 1 arm around her shoulders and holds still. She doesn't cry, neither does he. They just stand in that small waiting room with its industrial carpet and humming ventilation system, and the whole weight of the last 3 years, the grief, the warehouse shifts, the changed routes, the 2 a.m. arithmetic, settles and holds in that one embrace without requiring words. After a moment she pulls back and looks up at him. "Did you get it?" she asks. "Yeah," he says. She studies his face with the particular precision of a child who has learned to read her parents' expressions for information the words don't always carry. And then she nods once, slowly, like an agreement has been reached, and tucks herself back under his arm as they move toward the elevator. "Are we going to be okay?" she asks. Darrow looks down at her. "We're going to be better than okay," he says. He presses the elevator button. The doors open. They step inside. Behind them, back in the lobby, at the far end of the room, the older judge stands at the window with the phone still at his ear. His reflection is sharp in the glass. His expression is unreadable. His eyes are tracking something below, out on the street. He speaks, quietly, carefully. The words stripped to their minimum, the way people speak when precision matters more than explanation. He took it. A pause. Yes. Another pause, longer this time, while the voice on the other end says something the room cannot hear. Oh, then, he performed exactly as expected. His eyes move from the street below to the elevator bank behind him, reflected in the glass. He's inside now. He ends the call. He does not turn around. He stands at the window with his hands at his sides, looking out at the city 42 floors below. And the expression on his face is not the expression of a man who has just helped someone. It is the expression of a man who has just moved a piece into position. The elevator doors close. Darrow and Amara descend. And somewhere in the 42 floors between them and the street, something that has been set in motion, something Darrow does not yet know the shape of, begins to move toward him. What do you think that judge just set in motion, and does Darrow already know he walked into something bigger than a job? Only this story gripped you from the beginning and kept you here through the last word. That means you already know what kind of content lives on this channel. Stories that hit hard, carry weight, and leave you thinking long after the final scene. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a single episode the moment it drops. And before you go, drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you see in Darrow that others in that room missed? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else scrolling through needs to hear today. See you in the next story.